Hello and welcome to ABVCast, the podcast hosted by ABVCAP, Brazilian Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, in partnership with TozziniFreire, one of Brazil's leading law firms. Today, we will talk about one simple question, very simple question. Why are global investors still choosing Brazil? And to help answer that question, I'm happy to welcome two guests with first-hand experience investing in the country. Carlos Almeida, Senior Investment Officer at IFC. Carlos, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And Eduardo Farhat, Managing Director for Latin America at Caisse. Welcome as well, Eduardo.
Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us. It's great to have you here. Carlos, let me start with you. IFC has been investing more in Brazil in recent years. So how do you see Brazil today as a place for long-term investment?
Thanks for the invitation once again. IFC has been a partner in investing in Brazil for many decades. IFC was founded in 1956 and we started the first investment 1 year later, in 1957. The first investment was actually at Siemens. And in the last year, which closed in June 2025, it was actually our record year in terms of investment. So we deployed in Brazil roughly $11 billion. Out of perspective, we deployed 72 billion roughly across emerging markets. And Brazil has always been very important because of three pillars. One, because of its scalability. It's a very large market. Over 200 million people live in this country, mostly middle income. There's a lot of resilience. So we have very good, strong entrepreneurs who have founded different companies through different stages of the market, and the fact that we have sophisticated financial markets. So that's really important for us to make sure that not only we have financial inclusion, but also that we can make sure we can finance across those structure of the companies, and they have enough cash runway to keep building their businesses. Just as a quick example of one of the things that we did recently was an investment at Localiza, which is one of the largest rental car companies in the country. We had already deployed $200 million as an A loan to the business, and we have to mobilize another 500 million. And that was only possible because there was a lot of trust, not only locally, but globally, in the financial strength of the company, of the business, but also the macro condition for the environment to keep growing.
Thanks, Carlos. Very important points to start the conversation. Eduardo, let me ask you almost the same question. Caisse has also increased its investments in Brazil. So why is Brazil still an attractive market for a long-term investor?
Sure. Look, we manage the resources of nearly 50 pension funds and insurance companies from the province of Quebec in Canada. And we are looking to deploy sizable amounts of capital in reasonably stable markets. When you look particularly in Brazil, it's a market that can absorb large tickets. For example, we did the largest M&A in the history of Brazil, almost nearly $10 billion. It also has done a lot of reforms. I think that the resilient growth that we see in the economy is not by chance. I think Brazil was the most reformist country in the last 7 years, with more than 20 different reforms. And is a market that is reasonably liquid. You see, always there is some level of M&A activity, and that for us it's quite important, because sometimes we are a buyer, but sometimes we want to recycle our capital as well, and Brazil provides that.
Yeah, great. Eduardo, I'd like to stay with you because we need to compare Brazil with other emerging markets. So what makes Brazil really different in this comparison?
It's a very competitive world. So we are always competing for capital, and I can look at Brazil and compare it with other jurisdictions who have presence. I think to address your question, the first thing that comes up is solid institutions. I think we go through ups and downs in our institutions, but in the end of the day, it's stable. It's a democratic country. There is a rule of law. Sometimes it takes long, but it prevails. And that's comforting for a long-term investor like ourselves. The other one is predictable frameworks, particularly for infrastructure. We have seen that regulation has improved over the last decades, and that's also a key characteristic for someone like us, because we invest for very long term. We're talking about 20, 30 years. So we are the typical buy and hold type of investor. And I think whenever we had to scale up a business, it worked quite well. Mm-hmm. So Brazil provides the scale, provides the depth, and provide a good framework for us to work. That's not always the case in emerging markets.
Okay, good. Carlos, from your perspective, what are Brazil's biggest strengths?
Yeah, no, there are a number of strengths for Brazil specifically, and I can give a quick parallel to other regions as well. But first and foremost, Brazil is very diversified. If you look at trade, finance, which is probably one of the most important KPIs to understand how much a country is resilient to external shocks, we are at roughly 30%, and that is way below the KPIs from other emerging markets, and much lower than developed countries such as US and China specifically. As I had mentioned before, financial markets, I think this is definitely one of the most important strengths that we have. One product that we see as very liquid are FIDICs, which are trade receivables funds. We see established corporations as well as startups being able to raise FIDICs, and that's quite important when you don't have immediate availability of equity or other source of financing. They work very well. And then finally, I see innovation as a very strong pillar for the country. I personally cover most VC funds and startup investments we do in the region. And when you look at Brazil, it's the third largest VC market across emerging markets. It's only behind India and China. There was a big contraction after the pandemic because a lot of external capital fled the country. So we were talking about $3.3 billion in annual commitments per year. Now it's at roughly 700 million. But there's still a lot of innovation, a lot of companies raising seed to Series A.
In different sectors, right?
From different sectors. We see fintech, we see agtech, health tech, SaaS. So there's a really diverse base, not only of entrepreneurs, but of fund managers looking into those verticals. And that's definitely something that not only substantiates long-term investment, but also really boosts productivity for the region.
Great, thanks. Okay, let's move into another topic. Eduardo, I'd like to ask you about Canadian investors. Many countries are trying to reduce risks and diversify their investments. So do you think Brazil is becoming a good alternative to reduce dependence on the US market?
Look, like as we started this movement about 15 years ago, when we started opening offices abroad. Today, we have offices across all the relevant markets. The US is a key market, and that's not changing. We're going to be an important destination for Caisse's investment for any horizon we can look at. That said, when we look at Brazil, we can bring diversification. We can bring investments that are indexed to inflation, and in a good regulatory framework. And if you look at how do you optimize a portfolio, you're looking for low correlation investments. When you look at Brazil, our economy is less than 20% related to foreign trade. If you look at Mexico, is nearly 90%. So Brazil offers that diversification. So Brazil is not here to substitute the US, but it complements it quite well.
Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit more about the regulatory environment. That's top of mind for international investors, right? And Brazil has made important, as you said, improvements over the last few years, from capital markets regulation and compliance standards to the tax reform. So, Carlos, do you think Brazil has become an easier place to invest?
Yeah, here's it's a strong word. I would say more investable. All of those changes and developments in compliance, in corporate governance, in the tax reforms were super important to make sure that you have more visibility, that you have more confidence, you can attract more investors. But as usual, Brazil has a lot of complex systems and laws. So as long as you're partnering with someone who's local, who understand those little differences between each vertical, each jurisdiction, you should be safer to invest, I would say. So we see a lot of progress in that regard. The tax reform is probably the most important simplification that we had in decades, and it's extremely welcome. We, as investors, have looked into different alternatives for the tax complexities that most companies face. We have invested in a company that developed a software for accounting and taxes specifically. So we are following very close all of those developments across the years.
Okay, good. Thanks, Eduardo. What do you think in this subject is the next step thinking about regulation of capital markets here in Brazil?
I think Brazil came a long way in regulated market that's very strong in infrastructure sector. When you look at it, it applies to power, it applies to sanitation, it applies to gas. I think, and regulation, there is not such a thing like good or bad regulation, but how can I place this? Transparency matters more than the final outcome. So it's important that it's stable and predictable, so the investors can position themselves for the long run. Regulatory innovation, and some of our peers call it regulatory expropriation. It's catastrophic. And countries that experience with that has suffered a huge blow. And we see that, for example, in the power sector in Mexico. It's catastrophic results. So it's important that our regulators, our executive branch, our legislators stick to that. Regulation needs to be improved for the future, but the past cannot be changed. And that's key for future investments.
Okay, thanks. So another important issue is interest rates. So Carlos, interest rates are always part of the conversation about Brazil, right? So how much do high interest rates really affect long-term investment decisions?
Yeah, Brazil has always been the top 5 or top 10 highest real interest rates in the world, which is not necessarily helpful for attracting investments for the real economy. High interest rates basically affect valuation, leverage, exit. So I would say that is probably the negative side of it. We are seeing a lot of challenges, even from established fund managers to fundraise in this environment, because every investor at the end of the day has to make a decision. Do I put my money in risk-free rate, Brazilian sovereign risk at 14.25%, or do I wait 10 years to potentially get something over 20% in USD? And this is definitely something that is not helping overall to attract more money. That said, it's also a good entry point for international investors to understand better the country, put an amount of money in fixed income, and then potentially take some higher risk on other assets in the real economy. So I think we need to balance those things and just make sure that we understand how much high interest rate environment really affects cash flows.
Eduardo, do you agree about?
Yeah, fundamentally, yes, it's a good entry point. And somehow I'd like to see interest rates as a fever. It's not the cause, it's the consequence. So with a more solid fiscal policy, it's highly likely that this will go down. Fortunately, we have independent central bank. I think fighting inflation is key for any economy that is looking to grow. And this is one of probably the key question to be answered in the coming years is how to tackle fiscal policy in a way that it makes government spending sustainable.
Okay, thanks. To keep our conversation almost in the same topic, another important topic for international investors is the political landscape, right? So Brazil will have elections this year. Eduardo, how important are elections for foreign investors?
Look, we're truly long-term investors. So we take the horizon of 20, 30 years when we make an investment. We are here to stay. We're not come and go. So if you ask me, how does it affect? Very little. What we're looking for, long-term stability, institutionality, the true fundamentals that drives sustainable growth. That's what's important for us. And realistically, we've been seeing positive changes in Lula 1 and 2, then Dilma, then Temer, then Bolsonaro, now Lula 3. And we hope that the Brazil will keep the virtuous cycle. And what we do when a government change, we try to engage with them to be a constructive partner. So that's our model and approach.
Predictability is maybe the key word.
It's key.
Yeah.
If you think about an easy scared animal, it's an investor. So it's very easy to scare, and it runs very fast.
Okay. Carlos, do you see it in the same way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And IFC as well, I think, shares the same mission. We are long-term investors, we're counter-cyclical. So for us specifically, it doesn't make any difference if one versus the other wins the elections. And I think it goes back to the predictability that Eduardo mentioned and the fact that despite the candidates that we have right now, we haven't seen any candidate doing anything really crazy, despite the differences during the campaign. So we don't think that should really change the investable opportunities that we have as part of the gaps that we see in the economy.
Okay. So I'd like to ask both of you about confidence, and confidence is another key factor in investment decisions. And Brazil, as you both said, has economic ups and downs. Carlos, let's start with you. Why, from your perspective, do international investors keep investing here in Brazil?
I think as long as you're committed to having patience, selecting the really interesting opportunities on different verticals, and waiting for the different cycles to mature, there's still a lot to gain in terms of returns in Brazil. I think you can sometimes be a little unlucky depending on the market timing for the valuation of the local currency. But at a 10, 20, 30-year investment horizon, that shouldn't affect your returns, and therefore you should be really recycling that money. At least that's the case that we see in our portfolio. As I mentioned, we've been investing since 1957. Brazil is probably one of the most profitable countries that we have in our portfolio today. And every year we just keep increasing our envelope for the country. So that's definitely a case, not only for good opportunities, but for good financial returns as well, even in foreign currency.
Okay. Eduardo, would you like to add something about ups and downs? And
it's a phrase that I like, that confidence isn't a feeling. It's capital being deployed, the returns being monetized. And that builds the cycle of investors keeping coming back and again and again and again.
Okay. So let's talk about the last investments of IFC. Carlos, IFC has invested in areas like clean energy, bioeconomy, critical minerals, right? So how important is sustainability when IFC decides where to invest? And let's put Brazil in this discussion.
Yeah, no, it's key to our mandate. We do not invest in anything that is not sustainable, and sustainability is a word that has I would say, a wide definition. But most importantly, we're just trying to understand how much our investment helps that specific project in terms of making it more sustainable, and how much our investment really makes an impact in the economy overall. So for every 5 years, we have a report where we try to identify every country why it grew or did not grow as much as we had anticipated 5 years ago. And then we try to identify the bottlenecks and which sectors are most important to make sure that we deploy money and we address those challenges. Sustainability has always been a part of it. We have a separate team that tracks the most important KPIs. And I think our purpose is not only to understand, does that company follow the best standards today, but it's to create something with the company that is really going to take them to the place that we think is feasible and most value added for all the stakeholders in the country.
So, is there money on the table for investment in sustainability?
Yes, no,
agendas?
absolutely. So we just invested in BTG's TIG project, which is a project focused on reforestation. We committed to a fund focused on critical minerals. A global investor called Apian, who just did a first investment in the state of Bahia. We have been invested in a number of energy transition projects. The most recent one was at Mubadala's Acelen. It's a SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel project, out of Bahia as well. We have provided a big loan to Localiza, which you mentioned at the beginning,
Yep.
to help them on just renewing their fleet into low carbon vehicles. So there's definitely capital for those projects, and we do think that Brazil has sort of an edge in terms of the renewable space.
Okay, thanks, great. So, Eduardo, La Caisse has invested as well a lot in Brazilian infrastructure, more specifically. Why is this sector is so attractive?
Yeah. From a long-term investor, it provides inflation-linked revenues. That's one thing. So it's usually indexed to inflation. That provides a good hedge against FX. It's regulated, and it's a very deep market. And what I mean by deep market, the size of the transactions and the gap of infrastructure in Brazil is quite relevant. And that generates quite good opportunities for someone like us that can come, invest, stay for 20, 30 years, and deploy a large amount of capital in a single transaction. Usually we deploy $1 billion per transaction. So it's important that the market has a certain scale. And that has been the case in Brazil.
And what opportunities do you still see?
Okay, in general, like we see a number of things: the power sector, transmission, generation. We see a lot in transportation, urban mobility. We see a lot in water and sanitation, but also in newer sectors such as in the power sector, for example, batteries, digitalization, or for example, sustainable land management, which Brazil could be a powerhouse if there is a better legal framework around it.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to ask both of you about surprises, both positive and negative. When foreign investors come to Brazil for the first time, Carlos, start with you. What are usually surprises then from your experience and perspective?
Yeah, so positively, I think they're surprised by the level of innovation that we have here. I would say generally we do not do a good job marketing our country abroad. I've lived in London for 6 years, and I don't remember reading many articles that would cover positively the country as an economy. So innovation is definitely one of our strengths. And then the capital markets, the sophistication that we have, the independence of the central bank, are not things that we generally find in other similar emerging markets. And then on the negative, and I would say more of the barriers that we have, I don't think Brazil is necessarily a good macro story for investors on the short term. So it's really about understanding what each sub-vertical, sub-industry has to offer that you can explore, and what are the local partners, if you're not based here, understand and has experience on that sector that you could build together, and then make sure that you are really building an investment thesis that is solid and sustainable. So those are the two things that I would consider.
Okay, that's a good perspective. Eduardo, what do, from your perspective, what do foreign investors often get wrong about Brazil?
Okay. I think they underestimate complexity, the complexity of the tax system, the complexity of labor, the dynamic of the market, how competitive is the market. So there's a general underestimation.
Competitive, competitive in terms of exactly.
For example,
what?
if you try to allocate capital here, there is an abundance of capital. So you need to find an edge. You need to find a way to differentiate yourself. Otherwise, you're just providing a commodity to the market. The second thing is that it's very common that first comers overweight the political scenario, and they start confusing noise with signal, and that makes them lose their north. And the other thing that is usually confused, it's volatility with risk, which are two very different things. And sometimes you do the what I say, but I don't call it. It's a little bit negative, but it's buy high, sell low. You try to, okay, I'm gonna go when the cycle is up. I'm gonna leave when the cycle is down, because I start panicking, and that's usually when people get hurt.
Okay, thanks. We are almost at the end of the episode, so let's look ahead. Eduardo, what do you expect from Brazil over the next 5 years?
Eduardo.
Or 10 years? Eduardo, sorry.
Do you want to go ahead?
No, please.
Yeah, really. He was look at you. Come on.
My bad.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll tell you what are IFC's perspectives on this, and I think it resembles my personal feeling about it as well. So we are focusing on 5 key areas. One is infrastructure, obviously, and then infrastructure, we are talking about energy capacity. We are talking about AI data centers. We're talking about sanitation. The second is agriculture. We have just launched a new initiative between IFC and the World Bank. When I say World Bank, I mean IBRD, so the public side of it, called AgriConnect, which is aimed to really boost productivity in the field. So really help farmers and small entrepreneurs to make sure that they can grow faster. And this is something that demands not only private capital, but also the right policies in place. If you look at total factor productivity in Brazil, it's been stagnant since the 80s, but then agriculture has been a positive contributor to it.
Yeah.
So we see that as very important. Value-added manufacturing, so everything that can increase productivity and help boost outcomes for medium to large companies in the country. The fourth one would be tourism, because for us, job creation is a key topic, and we think that tourism attracts capital. There is a positive loop in the economy, and then finally, financial inclusion. And for financial inclusion, we have different lines for banks, for funds, which we see as a catalyst to unlocking more value to other sectors across the country.
Eduardo, now with you. You agree from your perspective, what will be the biggest opportunities thinking in Brazil for investments in the next 5 or 10 years?
Look, our major expectations that Brazil keeps quietly delivering, grow 2-3% per year. The need for infrastructure will be there, and is already here and will be there. For example, the energy transition, the amount of investment it requires just to connect all the different renewable plants in the country to the consumption centers is huge. We have a vibrant bioeconomy that we could explore more. We have a huge sanitation gap that is only initially addressed. And Brazil is a continental country that exports commodities in a large scales and needs its population to be able to move around. So anything in urban mobility and transportation seems to be the right place to be.
Okay, good. So I'd like to finish with one last question for both of you. If someone is listening to this podcast and thinking about investing in Brazil for the first time, what is the one piece of advice you would give for these people? Eduardo, let's start with you.
Okay, if I can say it in a very, very short way, is be here, partner well, and stay long. And why I say that? Be here. Brazil needs proximity. You need to be part of the local system. You need to be able to have your own network, your proprietary deal flow. When I say partner well, it's essential, like to be here, but not only that, to find the right type of partners. We have outstanding experience with our local partners. For example, Telefônica in Brazil, then Engie at TAG, or today with Grupo Energia Bogotá in Verene. And that's very important. They complement well. And stay long. Don't try to play the cycle. You will not be able to foresee it. It will come and go. If you have a long-term vision, you're definitely going to capture the alpha that a country like Brazil generates for a long-term investor.
Okay, good. And Carlos, to finish our episode, what is one piece of advice you would give?
I'm going to echo Eduardo, actually. Do not invest from a distance. So do find your local partner. Make sure you properly do your homework. Understand the local nuances from each sector. And then make sure that you understand how Brazil works at each different region. As Eduardo mentioned before, it's a continental country. We have very different characteristics depending where you're investing. So developing your network for each sector and for each base of investor, if it's an equity holder, a debt holder, or just a corporation that might potentially become your client, makes a huge difference for long-term returns in this space.
Okay, good. Finished. Carlos, Eduardo, thank you both for sharing your time and your insights with us today. It was a pleasure having you on ABVCast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to everyone who listened to this episode. If you would like to continue this conversation, join us at ABVCAP Experience 2026, taking place in São Paulo on September 16, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Tickets are now available at experience.abvcap.com.pr. You can also follow ABVCAP on LinkedIn. Visit abvcap.com.pr for the latest news about Brazil's private capital industry. And listen to more episodes of ABVCast wherever you get your podcasts. We will be here to keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye-bye.